Welcome everyone to our finale of our Nisenan speaker series called Reclaiming Cultural Identity in 2020. I am honored to introduce Shelly Covert, who is the Nevada City Rancheria Tribal Council spokesperson, and she's going to talk to you today about the work that they have been doing. So welcome, Shelly. Thank you for being here.
Awesome. Hamakani, everybody. Homoyabemi, Nishanana Mimi Wakamni, Lidam Lily Yapemni, Coach Bakan, Hedidi. So we're coming live today from the Nevada City School of the Arts, where we have been generously gifted our chirp office space, which is, it's a good thing you guys can't see the full background because it's in a shambles right now. We're trying to get it ready for, to actually function as a space for a small culture center. We have the beginnings of our tribal library here, museum artifacts, and our display materials, and hopefully it'll be a place where we can bring the school kids through to give them little brief chunklets of Nisenan history here, and be a sharing place. We also have the tribal office that's sort of tucked back in the way. So it's really a space that's doing double, triple, quadruple duty, and a great place to come today because my house is, I didn't realize how tough it is to work from home with the dog always gets its squeak toy. It seems it knows as soon as I go on Zoom, she goes and starts squeaking her little wail that she has. So it's very quiet here. I've got my assistant and support person over here off screen, Ember Amador, who is going to be monitoring the chat for us today. So if you do have any questions, please, feel free to shout out those questions. So like Megan was saying, this is the fourth in a 4-part speaker series that is part of the grant that we got with the Nevada County Library. And bundled within that grant is the speaker series. I hope that you have been able to make it out to the other 3. We had our linguist and friend, Dr. Sherry Tatch, where she presented about the Nisenan language and the mapping of Native California, which she is extremely knowledgeable and an expert in her field. She also is very knowledgeable about California Native culture. And we work with her closely in a lot of the cultural revitalization work that we do, not just with the language, but with where we are, where those old town sites are, what the old names were, which is really important to get some of those names back on the landscape. And then today, what I thought I would focus my last piece on is our trip to Russia. And I think a lot of people may have known that we went to Russia, but we really haven't had the time and space with, we have so much great work going on, which is a good thing to say, I suppose, when you're too busy in a good way. We really haven't presented about the trip to Russia, why it happened, what our goals were. It was a big deal for me. I'm such a homebody, being born and raised in Grass Valley, the tribe never having left our homelands here. Maybe a little boring to some people, but going to Russia was quite a big deal. It was a literal leap, very far from home, very far from our homelands. But the reason that we went was because, there was Russian occupation here. Which a lot of people know. I guess if you study California and American history, you may know the Russian presence here. I actually did not know that. I think the first time it came to my knowledge was I noticed in a lot of our burials, there are beads. Our people were a cremating society. And so you would see in these cremation sites, these beautiful glass beads. And it was, again, Dr. Tatch who had said those are Russian trade beads. And, I'm like, whoa, there were Russian people in Grass Valley. You know, how does that happen? And then learning about the forts that they had up and down the coast and their presence in Alaska, and how they came down and traded inland with the California Native American people. And so that was my first knowledge of that. And then I have a lot of just oral history stories, you know, that, you know, a lot of times we're told that oral history are just stories and that they can change over time. But when you're talking about a oral-based society that has always been that way, oral history it's not like the telephone game. It is mimicking and memorization so that you can be exact when you are retelling something to someone, so that it doesn't change, so that you don't lose the facts along the way like the telephone game. You don't lose pieces of information and it comes out real funny 2 or 3 generations down the road. It's really exact. And so what remained in the oral history were these stories that some of our sacred regalia, especially the kuksu, which is the men's secret and sacred society, they would dance and do ceremony in this full raven feather. If you've seen Addams Family, it's like Cousin It, where it's just completely covered. I hope that's not too disrespectful to use that analogy, but they're literally covered from head to foot in feather. And you know, most of these items are not in society today. And we don't have these dancing items that are being used in our specific culture. I've heard that some of the tribes toward the coast are doing kuksu again and the big head dances, and that some of these things may remain with them and their families. And that was very exciting for me to know. And then my friend Tanya Harrison, my friend and cousin, she was going to school in Hawaii and seeking her master's degree. And as part of that, she had an internship in Washington, D.C. And we had gone for the National Breath of Life, where they bring together people who are working on endangered languages. And if you know or have seen me speak before, I always joke about it, that they say our language was extinct, that our people from here are extinct. And that's why I'm always so excited to share songs and to introduce myself in language to prove that that is not true. We actually got the classification of the Nisenan language lifted from an extinct language up to what they call a sleeping language, that there is access to the language, but it's just maybe not being used in community the way it will be again one day soon, I hope. So as we were at Breath of Life in Washington, D.C., we had connections with the different museums and storage houses out there that hold California Native artifacts and linguistic materials, ethnologies, and we were able to go back and look at the baskets and see some of the incredible artifacts that I struggle with the word artifact because it makes it feel like a thing that's, you know, on a shelf all wrapped up that nobody can see or touch, which I guess is much of the culture is living that way today. But these to us are living things, you know. So we went to the Smithsonian and we were able to see the first time I had been in the presence of a kuksu cloak. And it's partial, it's damaged. It also has the headpiece, though they weren't being stored together. But I was able to see that piece when I was there, had some real true experiences and connecting with those, you know, their spirit beings. We truly believe they're still alive when they're done being in service to the community. They're supposed to be put to rest just like a person is. And so anyway, well, so many stories to tell. Tanya went to Washington, D.C. under an internship, and she had close interaction with these pieces for several weeks. And so it was great because she's going, Shelly, from your experience being there, and I'm here now, what can we accomplish? What can we do? Because Tanya is also part Nisenan. And so we had this great moment, and I said, well, I think she had stories as well on her side that there are these pieces in Russia. And I said, find out about that. Get us a grant. We need to go. I'm sure it's pretty expensive to go to Russia. So she had met someone who referred us to this granting agency, the Trust for Mutual Understanding. And so Tanya started the grant with her, she's going for her master's degree. I think she's almost finished with that now. So she had the academic piece that we really need to speak in the grant. We had CHIRP, which is our nonprofit that supports the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe. So with the combination of the two of us, we were able to put together a successful grant application. And it was $15,000. And we had to raise, I think, $2,000 through a GoFundMe, $2,000 or $3,000, I can't remember. But we successfully raised the extra amount of money because somebody forgot to put food in the budget. So of course, we all ended up paying some of our own money to successfully complete our project, but it was, in my opinion anyway, it was well worth the time and the energy and the extra fundraising that had to be done to get us there. And we did go there, and we were there in August. And really, it just feels like yesterday, and it also feels like 10 years ago, because I think the reason is that we've never officially presented. And so I will be sharing this with our grantor and, along with our grant report. And I hope that they're pleased, and I hope that they feel that this is money well spent. The Trust for Mutual Understanding is really to take a culture to share, to come together, and really a reciprocal sharing of culture. And that totally happened out there. It was amazing. Our contact in Russia's name was Yuri, and he just opened all the doors for us to go. As you can imagine, with some of the things between the United States and Russia, we had to get a visa. I didn't even have a passport. So we had to go through this process, of getting us each ready. And then they had to officially invite us from the Koontz Chimera Museum there. And it's in St. Petersburg. And so that's sort of the story. I have a slideshow that I'd like to share. And, Tanya is great because she's a research person. She is in the intimate details. She does Hawaiian feather work with the little itsy bitsy tiny feathers. She does bead work. She recreates much of the cultural materials, like milkweed string and hemp string. Very central to Nisenan cultural materials are the knots that they use to hang feathers. They're very unique. We got to see all of these things up close. You can't recreate these items if we don't know how they were made. And so we're, part of Tanya's experience and her commitment to recreating these things is, it's not me, the one. I'm not necessarily that detail person. I do like to do beadwork and small things, but I tend to move from project to project to project. And Tanya, when she gets in, and you can see with some of our the photos that I'll share with you, we're down in there lifting up these tiny feathers, trying to see the knot work and the netting that's holding all this together. Some of the pieces that we saw at the Smithsonian Institute were in such perfect shape that you couldn't see. I mean, they're just these beautiful feather blankets on both sides with this dense feather work, and you can't see how they're made. And so that was one of the things I'll point out in the slides, is that you could actually see, because these were used items. And she was thrilled to death. we're looking at things, and she's going, "Oh my gosh, you can see inside there," and her whole world just lights up. And so you can see some of she's got her measuring stick, and our gloves are on, and we're down in, able to hold and touch these items that had been collected in the 1840s and from our watersheds. And Tanya was saying that, being able to feel the weight of an item is extremely important when you're recreating, so that you can know if you're doing it right. If it comes out feeling like a piece of paper, we may have missed the mark. And if you can't pick it up, it may be a little bit too heavy and too dense. So I'll go ahead and get the slides running for you guys. Hopefully I can do this fairly seamlessly. Oh my gosh, I think it worked. I don't know if there's a way to make this full screen so you don't have to see the sides, Elle. Oh, down here maybe? That's all right. Yay. All right. Okay, so is everybody seeing that? Can you see my screen? Okay, great. So here is, I think this is a picture that was taken by one of our team. We just got there. I still am holding all my bags. We're at the Koontz Chimera Museum. And talk about old, California is so young with our buildings and stuff. I mean, obviously not Nisenan culture because it's, 10, 13,000 years old. But the buildings and the landscape that is St. Petersburg was just astounding to me. I'd never been in places so old, these buildings that were created by hand, by people. And so here we are, we just come in the museum, and I'm taking a look at just their collections are extensive. They're incredible. They're some of the best in the world. And I know that a lot of our tribal people, it's a conundrum to say a collection is the best, because many people believe that the collections are not in service to those items that are being held there, maybe against their will. So I want to just say that I don't want to be flippant when I talk about these great collections. I understand that there's always two sides to something, and this is a very serious side that I want to always acknowledge and not, act like I'm just being, oh yay, it's all so great. So this was at the Koontz Chimera Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia. And missing, you'll see an empty chair here next to Tanya, was Ember, because she was taking the photo. And I noticed going through my photos, she's not in hardly any of the photos. And the couple that I did have, she was making kind of funny face. I don't think she would appreciate me putting them up in a slideshow for everybody to see. But the missing body here in our team is Ember Amador. So sitting here with the baseball cap is James McCoog, also my husband. He probably has he and my cousin Saxon, I would say, have the strongest hold on the Nisenan language. So it was very important for someone who could acknowledge not only that, hey, that's Nisenan that we're seeing, but have some greater understanding than myself as to what that language is saying. And then there's me, and then there's Yuri, he is our contact there, and there's Tanya, the one I was talking about. So here, again, that empty spot on the side, Ember is missing. So, it took 14 hours plus actually to get to St. Petersburg, which was quite an ordeal. If anybody travels out there, quite an ordeal in and of itself. I'm not a traveler, so it was a big deal for me to experience that long of a flight. We did stop. Oh, thank you. We did stop in. Where did we catch our plane? Amsterdam. No, was it Amsterdam? Darn it. Tanya would know, but she can't speak. Tanya, if you can type it, would you?
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
Yeah, I went to Finland.
Finland, thank you. All right. So thank you, Tanya. Hi. So, here's some of the architecture. Amazing, just, mind-blowing for me again, but so is Sacramento. Here's just some of the beauty of St. Petersburg. It rained on us a lot, but the weather was perfect. And so, yeah, the architecture was amazing. But amazing Russian architecture isn't what we went to see. It was sort of the, you know, the icing on the cake, I guess you could say. Oh, Ember, this is doing dumb stuff again. So we went to see Nisenan culture. Thank you. And so Russia collected, like I've already told you guys this, so in the mid-1800s, a lot of California Indian culture was collected by the Russian people. This is our first day going up to the museum and meeting Yeni. Tanya, do you remember how to say his name? Gieni. He was the assistant to the professor there. So we got to see displays. Here in this display, if you can see, it's behind glass, so you're getting quite a glare, but is one of those feather cloaks that I was talking to you about. And it's a hugely important Nisenan cultural item. It's a great sign of wealth. People that had these incredible feather blankets were usually very wealthy or were the head people in the tribe. And, you know, we led by kinship, by, you could have a head person, a head man, a hook, or women could also be leaders, Mayan. And so the wealthier people were usually leaders or great tradespeople. So finally we got into the archives and we got to see these things that, you know, weren't behind glass, that we really had spent all this time to get to. And here, I was really having a great time reminiscing over these photos. This on the left of the screen is a feather rope, all just gorgeous, amazing handiwork. The masters who put these items together, just incredible. Again, there was the end of the rope here. I'm not sure if I got another photo of it later, that was kind of damaged and open, and Tanya was able to look in and see inside, and she was just all giddy. Oh, I can see inside that one. And here you have Tanya on the right looking at one of the many Nisenan baskets in the collection there, which was a total treat. And I wasn't aware. I mean, I had the catalog of inventory that they had, but a lot of it was in Russian, which wasn't very helpful for me, and a lot of it was just very general. So it wasn't really until we got there and got to go into the archives and had the lady there that was bringing things out, that we actually got to see the unique identity of these items that the catalog didn't reflect for us. These are some of, again, they're laying flat, and if you've never seen these items before, you might really not know what you're looking at here. So on the left, these are the top knots that many of the California dancers wear, the women and the men alike. The women wear the batsuni, is what they call them up north. In the Maidu language, I don't have the Nisenan word for batsuni, but you can see there's a lot of the feathers here that we're not using today. And I would say that is because they're not accessible to use anymore. The great decline of the ecology out here. Much of our culture, as we're in this movement of cultural revitalization, you know, you can't go get a grizzly pelt real easy, you know, which is paramount for some of the ceremony. The two stars of the show, and I don't say that in disrespect to any of the other pieces that we saw, But that Cultural Regalia, and I have photos that you'll see later, and a great condor, they got in the wings, and this amazing, you can only imagine what it looked like when they opened up the wings to dance, the California condor, very much in the same boat that the Nisenan people are in. Is there's not a whole lot of people left, there's not a whole lot of condors left, almost extinct, and brought back from the brink of that. So there's a lot of pelican feathers, and the ducks, and I've heard the slash of the species of ducks are just a fraction of what they used to be, before the gold rush. And then here's that rope again on the side, and you can, if you look in, you can see some of the spots where it's worn, probably where it was held, that Tanya was so happy about being able to see inside those. Here's a close-up of the pelican, what they have labeled as a boa, but the women would, Nisenan women especially, would always wear a boa, and these are pelican feathers. And at first, I thought they were dried leaves because they look like leaves to me. I'd never seen feathers cut in this fashion so that they lay in the way that they do. It's just beautiful. And I just didn't know, it gets me a little teary, I just didn't know this about my own culture. So it was such a privilege to be able to see some of these really old items, to have it reintroduce itself to us and to the culture. And I suppose, it's a very selfish way to look at these collections of any kind. If those items hadn't been collected, this would be completely absent from my knowledge, the knowledge in my family and my tribal unit. And maybe that's the way it was supposed to be. I see it as a very selfish and egocentrical worldview that, ooh, I get to, have that knowledge. And at the same time, I'm so happy that I got to see these things that I had never seen before, that are really, were outside of my cultural purview, I guess you could say. Well, I lost my forward button again. Okay, so yeah, we're examining closely to see how these were created. And what Tanya will talk about is, the importance of how the feathers are hung on in the knots. What is that netting mechanism? They wore nets on the head, wore nets to hold the feathers of all different ways, and we were really able to look in and see a lot of that stuff that we couldn't see, especially at here locally in Washington, D.C., because they're so perfect, because they were made for trade, so they weren't used by anybody. So I guess that's also two sides of the coin. Like, it's not used, it's in pristine condition, but you can't see inside to see how it's made. And here we are looking inside of one of those top knots. You can see, you can really get in there and see the stitching. You can see the family of knots and the network that has to go on. Here's one of the feather blankets that they have. It's just beautiful. But you can see on the edges where it's worn, and you can see the string and how the string is attaching. We were counting how many rows and how many vertical and how many horizontal, how many vertical. We were able to do that because we could see inside the piece because it had been worn. There was use on it. Here's that, I'm obsessed with this one on the left. I have so many photos of it. We were looking in the end, and you can see the netting underneath. And so Tanya, we were taking pictures. Tanya was measuring because she really wants to do sample recreations for us so we can start getting these items back into use. Yeah, that's what I just said, right? Just some, the room we were in there, the examination room, was really like somebody's office. It was very different from what we experienced out here, like at the Smithsonian, where they just, I don't know why. I guess I can't even guess why the difference. But that little table is really all we had to work on. And not to say that in a negative way. I mean, I'm glad if we had to hold the items or if there was no table at all. But it was very, very much different than the experience that I had at the Smithsonian, where, you know, they have just a wing that's all dust and temperature proof, and the humidities are just perfect. The items are stored in these great long cases, and they bring these carts out to you, and they take the item out right where in the aisle that it's from, and you look at it right there, and then it's put right back. So these were being brought from just a little room. The picture on the right where I'm standing, there's a door kind of behind me, and it went off into this, I didn't really ever get to see inside of it, but that's where she was pulling the items from. And then, you know, this was the surface that we were able to examine on. And I mean, it sufficed. It was all right. And I really enjoyed being able to work with Tanya in that moment, because she's just so precise. You know, it's something I tease her about, right? Because she's just a detail-oriented person. But you have to be in this. I mean, this is mathematics without graph paper and computers, you know, for these folks to make, especially some of the elaborate basket designs on a conical sphere. Talk about engineering. And it was just absolutely important that we had the moment to get in there to look at this with Tanya, so that we could begin the recreation process somehow. And, you know, that process is so long because we're not a federally recognized tribes. We don't have access to all of the feathers, because some of them are protected, which is going to make that a little bit more difficult. We may have to do some substitution along the way. Anyway, all part of the longer view in the cultural revitalization. On the left here, this is an earring. It's an earpiece. And I was blown away, because I've seen the sticks with a little bit of feathers hanging off the front before, but I had never seen anything this elaborate. And it's just beautiful. It's got the woodpecker pelts, which we used heavily here. Especially here in our Nisenan territory. And then the old style of beads, you know, with the little abalone that we're using today still. But these pieces I have not seen something like this ever in my lifetime. My mom said that she had never seen anything like this in her lifetime. And just a beautiful, again, a piece of culture that had all but disappeared, you know, from at least what's being created and used today in our tribal unit. And then on the right, you've got a whistle, which is, you know, the men use the whistles in the dance, and it's just it was a gorgeous piece. And they called these bird leather. What is, you know, and Tanya looked to where I actually just thought it was leather. Like, I'm like, how much, you know, like a cow, when you get leather, if you're trying to get leather from a bird, that must be really tedious and hard work. But she went in and she saw that it used to be covered with feathers, so that it would have had that little the red woodpecker. This would have been covered in red woodpecker feather pelt. And, you know, they'd all but worn off over the 100, 200 years, 200 plus years that they have been kept. So again, just really, really beautiful. And had it not been for Tanya's eye, it's a good capture in this photo on the left, but you don't see, I mean, I don't see any feathers on the photo on the right. So had I gone out to recreate this tomorrow, I probably would have plucked all the feathers. I would have made bird leather, not knowing that it should be and was at one time covered in that gorgeous bright red. So again, Tanya's eye and her attention to detail is paramount in doing any of this work. There she is, the master work, you know, holding up a piece, trying to figure out how in the heck these things are put together. And then on the right, we're looking at a mat that was just, I don't know if you can see the detail, incredible detail. So we measured that. We were able to look at the different weaving that was used to make that mat. And that would have been used in anybody's house for sitting on outside. You know, there was always attention to comfort, even though people were sitting on the floor, and, you know, we see it as like, well, they didn't even have chairs, you know, or beds and bed frames and stuff, but they were always comfortable with the different natural resources that were available. And this is another time, Ember, again, not in the photo, but, you know, we're standing there taking a look at some of the incredible things that they have there at the Koontz Chimera. And so, you know, the reason we went was to see that Condor cloak and to see the Cultural Regalia. And we missed the guy. You know how it always goes, right? The guy who had the key left on vacation the day before we got there, and he got back the day after we left. So unfortunately, we were not able to open the case and get inside to fully inspect these items that were kind of, you know, I don't want to say they were the reason we went, but everything that we saw was so incredibly important that I didn't even know it was existed and was going to be there in the way that it was. So, and then I'm also very much, I believe that there are reasons for things, you know, maybe these are men's regalia items. Back in the day, Tanya and I, even though we're Nisenan, we wouldn't have been in close contact with these items. And I did worry about that a little bit. That's one of the reasons, you know, when James was there, he knew the language. The first thing he did is I said, you have to go in and talk to these items in language, and you need to introduce them to us as women, you know, that, and make sure it's okay that we even come in contact with them. Because you know, you could call it bad medicine or unlucky or just breaking protocol, but there are reasons why maybe we shouldn't have been up in there touching it all and examining it, you know, in the way that we wanted to. So I was fine that there was no key. I'm like, of course they're not. I'm not surprised at all. I really wasn't surprised. But here they are. And, you know, they are widely photoed. They are widely publicized. They are on the back cover of the Koontz Chimera's collection book. It's a big, gorgeous tabletop book, hardcover, beautiful, which we were gifted one in English, which I thought was really awesome. But these are some of their prized beings in their collection. And I normally wouldn't have taken a photo, especially to share. I did ask permission, and I truly felt, you know, that these items were asleep. This is in a main thoroughfare, like people walk up to them and around them when people are coming through. I guess they're, you know, their big times is in the summer when they have a lot of traffic coming through there. And so they're, you know, traditionally when they weren't being danced and in use in ceremony, they would have been put away by a person who was designated to keep care of them. They interacted with them spiritually and did all, you know, tended them to make sure they didn't have bugs and dust and goo and whatever, you know, gets on things after. But they're just standing there. One of the things that we were able to do with Tanya in her internship in Washington, D.C. was, you know, these, in one perspective and one way of looking at these things are standing at attention. You're just standing there. If you believe that they're alive at all, that they're just caused to stand for selfish reasons, so we get to look at them, any of the things, like I said before, in collections. There's a great percentage of the Native people who believe that and believe that they should be able to rest. But when Tanya was in her internship, she was able to, I said, that thing needs to lay down, and she worked her magic out there, and they were worried that it was going to fall apart coming off of that form, that it's standing on. And they were able to make a bed for it in one of the big, like, map drawers, I guess, Tanya, so that it was laying and not standing up like that at all times. And that felt good to me. It felt like we were giving back after taking, trying to see how it's made, and, oh, what's that feather and how's that hang, that we actually were able to return favor and let it lay, at least, even though it's still, like held captive, or if you want to put it that way. And I know a lot of people don't believe that, and that there's the other side of the coin, that, hey, if it wasn't there, you guys wouldn't have been able to see it, and all the generations below you would never get to see it. So, I'm sure everybody has their own opinion and own views on that topic. And here's a little bit closer up. Makes me a little teary. It was so amazing to see it. And a closer of the Condor. Oh, I'm missing a slide. Did I skip it? Hey, Elle, can you help me? Oh, there's a back button. Oh, I guess I'm not. Maybe I'm just crazy. Anyway, those are, I guess that's it. That is, for the slideshow, that was, can you unshare my screen now and put me back on view? Sorry. Awesome. All right, so I want to be conscientious of the time here. How are we doing on time now? Okay, great. I did want to talk about, CHIRP is our nonprofit, the California Heritage Indigenous Research Project. If many of you have seen me speak, I hate preaching to the choir, or, being redundant and telling people things that they already know. But CHIRP was born, or put into place, created, to support the Nevada City Rancheria and Nisenan people. And our mission is to preserve, protect, and perpetuate Nisenan culture. And, that is a really wide arc of how going to Russia may seem a little odd at first, when our main target right now, I guess, is the restoration of our federal recognition. So the Nevada City Rancheria was federally recognized until its wrongful termination in 1964. And since then, the tribal members and tribal families have been without any of the federal Indian services that are provided for Indians by the federal government. And that includes housing, health, education, economic. The biggie is school. Given the opportunity to go and get educated, to bring those skills back to your tribe, and then help them progress, is paramount. I mean, I can't really even say that's more important than housing. When you have a very poor and vulnerable population, housing, if you don't have a house, you're probably going to get sick faster. And that's the same with the economic development stuff. I as I'm learning to write grants and searching out different granting organizations, I look at the things that are only for federally recognized tribes, and it is, I mean, it's mind-blowing, especially right now during the coronavirus. Tribes have access to the non-competitive federal grants that are, I mean, would be life-changing for us in this moment right now, and we do not have access to that. So we are, I've never thought about it this way, we're thrown into the competitive pot with all of our other local charitable organizations. And I know that we all have different missions, but at the same time, you know, we're a small community, and I'm so conscientious of, I don't want to take grant monies from, you know, Hospitality House, or I don't want to double write for a grant that one of our great environmental organizations is writing for. I'm very conscientious about that, and it doesn't feel okay to me, especially because we're sort of the newer one on the block, the newer organization. And, you know, I look at those federal funds, some of them you are competitive against other tribes throughout the nation. But in moments like this, in a time of crisis, they are non-competitive grants, and they're hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I think what hundreds of thousands of dollars would do for the Nisenan people right now, and it's just, it's incredible. So fighting for that restoration of our federal recognition is, it's everything. It's so important. And I know I've heard from other tribal leaders from other federally recognized tribes that, you know, they laugh and they say, you know, young Pawin, if you, you know, it's not a magic stick. Federal recognition doesn't fix everything. The health care sucks sometimes, you know, and the reservations are really poor. And I'm like, but at least it's something. When you're coming out of complete erasure with nothing, no net, no, I mean, there's no support system there whatsoever. So, you know, CHIRP really was created for that. And so I know when we were writing for the Russia grant and talking about going to Russia, it seemed like maybe pulling us off task a little bit, or like, aren't you supposed to be trying to get recognized? Or, you know, shouldn't you be doing a, you know, curriculum with the local schools? I thought you were getting your culture center together. Or what about your archives you keep talking about? But it gave me such an incredible perspective going to Russia. And I talk things a lot. I can say, as we do cultural revitalization, and you can't just go kill 1,000 woodpeckers because we want to, you know, have dance belts for all the girls, or yeah, well, you know, eagles are endangered. We're not federally recognized. A, if we have them, we're going to get put in jail because it's illegal. And B, again, there aren't so many that you can just go take freely from a population that's huge and sustainable. And with most of the other animals, the wolf, I mean, even the beavers and the river otters that were just in such abundance here, they're not here now. And I say that a lot. I say that the environment suffered as the Nisenan people suffered. There's so much that isn't there now that was. I have a little window, a little glimpse. Oh, great. But for me to go and see these regalia items that I'd never seen before, and that I probably couldn't recreate tomorrow if I wanted to, because some of those animals just, they're not stable. You can't just go take from their populations. Really gave me another level of, well, a little bit of a level of sadness. It's easier to talk about something, but when it sinks into your heart and it's like boom, and it's really there. I got that perspective from going there. I got that perspective saying we had to fly all the way to flipping Russia, you know, to see something that should be in our communities, you know. it was really impactful for me. And I'm not a bitter person. I'm not out there blaming anything, but it gave me a perspective that I really didn't have before. And well, again, it might have felt a little off task, like, oh, wouldn't it be cool? We get to fly, right, and go to Russia and all this stuff. It really came in and then recalibrated the rest of my work in a way. I think it made it even just a little more serious than it was before. I know we have a hard time fundraising. It's like, well, we don't want to ask for money. Everybody, you know, there's not a lot of people out there who are just doing great, who have tons of money to throw around. Which also gave me perspective to, yeah, the government, there's Indian programs there that we should have access to. We did have access to. We're one of the 3 federally terminated tribes in California that have not been restored out of 44. There's only 3 congressionally terminated tribes that have yet to be restored. And that is not right. It's not okay. And so with all these conversations comes also the lesson of social justice. What is injustice? What is environmental injustice? All these things that I just didn't have the perspective to know. Maybe I knew it in words, and I know that it's not fair, but I really just didn't get the depth of it. And having to go to Russia and like see things written there about us in a way that's like, oh, lo, the poor Indian, you know, and it's like, wow, it's huge. And it's a very, very serious perspective as we continue to lose tribal members, you know, because they're sick and they don't have enough to not be sick sometimes. Okay, good. So I got a question. Someone's asking about the name, right? I've totally diverted from the topic and the name. So from the bottom of the lake, that is literally another thing that took me a lot of years to understand. It took me getting older. There's so much family history to take in. And as I do this work, and I read more, you know, dissertations or cultural pieces that academic folks have written that are talking about us, you know, and trying to pair them, because they don't always pair together with my traditional knowledge. Sometimes they're in conflict with each other. And I always believe the oral tribal history. Because I know that the written history is missing somebody's perspective, and that perspective is ours. And so from the bottom of the lake, as I started realizing, I thought it was really strange that a lot of our burning grounds, which, like I said, we're a cremating society. So, you know, we don't have tombs and headstones. So you can't identify a burial ground or burning ground, because it looks like nature, you know. And as I was curious about our burning grounds and how the ceremonies around burning, sorry, don't mean to speak disrespectfully, or but around the burning of a person and all the protocol and all the culture that goes around that moment, I was really obsessed with that when I was younger. And so a lot of my questioning to my grandpa went toward that, because it was outlawed in, you know, 1860. I think they outlawed the burning of the people. And also outlawed the burning of the land, which we were traditional burners. You know, you burn the ground so it kept the bugs away and kept the plants pliable and delicious. So I started seeing that a lot of our old burial grounds and burning grounds were under reservoirs. And at first I thought it was like some crazy conspiracy. I'm like, isn't it weird that all the old places are underwater? Is that some kind of tactic or something that was used? I don't know. And I met a person, a docent at the Firehouse #1 Museum in Nevada City. Oh my gosh, it's May. I think I docent this Friday. Wow, glad we're all here for me to remember that. Oh my goodness, that made my cheeks red. And And I spoke with someone, we were having a conversation. He'd come into the museum and we were talking about culture and the Nisenan people and everything. And I'd mentioned this, like, is this some conspiracy? And he said, well, actually, it's probably a horrible coincidence, because the confluence there, the natural coming together of land that would be an obvious place to put a dam, probably backed up seasonally and was just naturally rich, which is why the people would put their towns there, or maybe why, you know, the burning ground was usually adjacent to the town that was there. And so I was like, okay, all right, well, I'm okay with that explanation. And then trying to, you know, for me, it was always somebody else's tribal families who were in file cabinets at a museum or a university somewhere. And one time we were going by Bullard's Bar, me and my grandpa, we were talking about that area, and he had said, I was asking him, I always asked him, you know, well, where's our people buried, though, Grandpa? Where are we? And he said, well, they used to be there. And he was talking about, I was talking about two places, actually. He's talking about the reservoir at Lake Wildwood, and he's talking about Bullard's Bar. And I never questioned the man. You know, he would tell me something and I'd be like, oh, I didn't say, well, good, I mean, used to be, where are they now? And I had heard that one of, before the building of the first Bullard's Bar Dam, the universities came in and did a lot of study and removal of the people there that were in the burning grounds and the burial grounds. And I've heard that they're still in file cabinets at one of these universities. And that really, and then later in years, I don't know if any of you know about the FERC process, the Federal Energy Relicensing process, where our dams and hydraulic plants have to relicense every 50 to 60 years with the federal government. So our dams are going through that process. And part of that with CEQA and NEPA, the environmental protections that happens, the tribal consultation has a little piece in there in the cultural part. So these big organizations are having to engage with the tribes, which is really, I mean, this didn't happen in my mom's generation. It didn't happen in my grandpa's generation. So we're having to learn how to do this process, and it's kind of scary sometimes, because I go to these meetings and I'm just like, I have no idea what's going on here, you know. But I show up and the acronyms that everybody uses, and I'm just it's a lot. Anyway, in that process, we actually took a boat trip out on Bullard's, and because on their map they had where some of the old sites were. And it really was at that moment that because I get creeped out about stuff like that. I don't like floating around on top of burial grounds. It's just not one of the things that, you know, I think could bring you any luck in any way whatsoever. And so that, like, floating across the top of things, literally knowing that they're under there. And then there's this amazing poem that my friend and our advocate, Judith Lowry, she is a founder of CHIRP. She looked for the tribe when her and her husband moved here, I think 15 years ago, and her dad's an old Indian guy, and he asked her, what Indians you got down there? And she said that she went looking for us, and it was like a spaceship had just sucked us all up because we were completely invisible. Judith had always said she was the wedge for us, you know. She came out early saying, what, you guys are invisible, you need to show yourselves. And we were afraid, I suppose, in many forms of that word. But she said she's the wedge, she's going to cut through and we can fly in behind her. And, you know, I try every day to do that and honor her wedginess that she, you know, helped spark all these things for us. But she read a poem, I don't know if it was by Melissa Hardrow. Darn it, I'm going to force myself to remember what that poem is called. Do you know? Indian Cartography is what it's called. And in part of it, it's talking about an old Indian guy who's floating along the top of the water that used to be a river that drowned itself, and tracing the map of his ancestors tracing lines on the map like the blood of his ancestors. And he's like on this lake, you know, this fake lake, remembering these things in this poem. And her own, was it her dad, I believe? Deborah Miranda. Thank you. Deborah Miranda poem, Indian Cartography. Beautiful poem. I think it was her dad. It could have been her darn it. I hate it when I don't get details right. But they, up at Lake Amador, he had broken his arm because he fell off his horse riding across this big, gorgeous meadow that then became underneath the lake, of course. So that bottom of the lake, you know, it keeps coming up over and over again. And this water issue, of course. When the Centennial Dam topic happens, you know, there are burial grounds that could be inundated there. And I mean, none of the other generations were asked or brought into any of these conversations like, hey, we're going to put a dam over there. How do you guys feel about that? You know? And so at least now the issue is being forced because of the environmental protection and the cultural consultation pieces that go with that. And I can't speak to how effective those pieces are. Some are more effective than others, depending on which agency you're working with. But most of the people are really nice. I've actually met some friends, you know, people that I would call more than an acquaintance that have tried to help me be part of the process because it's so intimidating and just so overwhelming. One day I realized I was going to all these meetings and I'm like, they're all at work. And I'm here because I'm trying to save my culture. Wow, this is a weird moment, you know, things dawn on me late, I guess. But that's where that name comes from. Thank you so much for asking. Because, you know, with that story, it's a little creepy and it's kind of deep, you know, what is under those lakes. And a lot of times you get Nisenan burial grounds that you didn't know about. I think there should at least be a disclaimer so people are like, well, you know, float across a couple burial grounds, whatever. But some people might really take issue and want to know that up front, like me. How are we on time? Are we good? Do we have any more questions? Can I just keep talking? All right. Yeah, great. Okay, great. So yeah, I could talk forever and ever and ever. I would like to remind everybody to please, if you haven't already, pick up a copy of our Chairman Richard Johnson's book, The History of Us. It's a little bit of a tough read, but he's brought together very successfully. Like you can't just go get a book about the Nisenan people here or the Nevada City Rancheria. We're buried in all these other labels that people have put on us from time to time throughout time. Maidu is the most confusing for people. There are 4 separate tribes, the Nisenan, the Machupta, the Konimkawi or the Concow, and the Maidu proper or the Yamani. All under that Maidu label because of the linguistic similarities that supposedly 9,000 years ago, we all spoke the Proto-Maiduan language. You know, that's the linguists or the academic, you know, story. Not all tribes believe in that. Might sound, some people say it's childish to not believe in science, you know, but I'm just like, well, whose paper was it? Who was the old guy who came out and wrote that paper that made it the science when, you know, there could have been other perspectives, like our perspective that we all came from Estamiani, which is our sacred mountain. Grandpa said it's not polite to call it the Sutter Buttes, but most people know it as the Sutter Buttes. That's our place of origin. And so we came from there and we didn't migrate from anywhere. That's where we're from. So if anybody does have any questions, I would be happy to answer questions for you. We just had a really successful, was it yesterday, our concert? 2 days ago? Boy, it all blends together, doesn't it? We had a very successful concert, virtual concert with all these amazing people. So this is my second time, third time, I guess. See, I just don't know. Coming to you folks in this virtual format. And we actually did a virtual concert and it was awesome. I mean, you're missing the, you know, the clapping and the energy from, I'm a musician. So, you know, I rely on that That's a horrible thing to say. I rely on that clapping. But it's been really successful. So I hope you've enjoyed our time together. And any questions? Yeah, if anybody has any questions, please throw it out there. Otherwise, I'll just talk about a few of the other projects that we're working on right now. One of the projects we're working on that's just been at the forefront of our consciousness, that's kind of a obvious thing, is to get Nisenan history and some glimpses of, at least glimpses of Nisenan culture into our school systems. So we've been working on curriculum now. It's been about a year, maybe a little more. We've hooked up with some great people, a couple people from Circle, and some other of our church volunteer team. We have an amazing church volunteer team who know about curriculum, and we're starting to put that together now. And we really, really hope, it's changed things with all the COVID-19, but we really hope to have something in the schools by next year, even if they're just little samplets that the teachers can grab for themselves to teach when it comes around. Usually it's around, you know, quote unquote, Columbus Day and Thanksgiving. You start, the 4th and 5th graders start learning about the California Gold Rush also. And so we want to have some, you know, adjacent views or another perspective to share. You know, that before the settling of California and before the settling of America, you've got these old tribes here that have so much history to offer and share. And again, it's not their it's another one of those flip side of the coin. You know, you can't, it shouldn't be the tribe's job only to tell the real histories of what happened in some of these places. And it's a little bit of an extra burden to do that. But again, I take it on with enthusiasm. I'm lucky to have such great team members with me that make the work not feel like work. You know, there's a lot of support there, because it gets a little tenuous sometimes. Talking about is like, how do you teach children about the ugliness of some of this stuff? I struggle with that sometimes, because I mean, you can put flowers and stick stuff to it, but no matter how you look at it, most of it was really ugly for the native folks. And finding a good way to talk about that and share that history with children, especially when we haven't fully done it with the adults yet, you know, is a little scary for me. So I feel like we're always riding a really safe line that's, I want to tell the truth, but I don't want to scare anybody, and I don't want to make anybody feel, you know, like they're being persecuted for the past. Because that's just not a good place to go. Let's just get on the same page as like, yes, that actually did happen. And let's not fight about that, because it's a fact. and you know, find a way to move together from that. CHIRP is just, we've got a lot of projects in the work. We're obviously doing this library grant with the Nevada County Library. The speaker series is just part of what we're fulfilling with the grant. I don't know if any of you came out to our 3rd speaker series, where we showed the book Anita Ope, which is the story of my grandma when she was a little girl, and her interaction with her dream time and the spirit animals. And it was the spirit of the animals who used to be great and present in this landscape: the condor, the grizzly, the eel, the salmon, and several other characters that come in and dance with her at the fire. And we're just we're trying to get this picture book printed. Again, we've gotten a little extension because of the COVID situation that we're all in, and getting those books into the hands of 4th graders in Nevada County. So that's in the works. Another piece of that is getting, we have, in the last grant that we did with the library, we put together a digital kiosk, an iCell it's called. And if any of you have been to Heritage Day, you may have seen the iCell or been able to interact with it. But you literally have to be in front of the iCell to experience the data that's in it. And so we're taking that information, and it's getting uploaded onto the Nevada County website. So it will be accessible to a larger population, and that is really exciting. And then we're also upgrading, we did a Nisenan territorial map, and it's just static and two-dimensional. And so we're taking that and we're turning it into GIS, and we're making a story map to go along with it, so that we'll have a couple points on the map, hopefully a few points on the map, where we can click on a town site and you can see the original Nisenan name, maybe some of the families associated with it, and the different plants that may still be growing at some of these spots, where it is today and that kind of thing. So it's been, the library grant's been pretty great. We're also fulfilling another grant from our grant partners, Sierra Health Foundation. And it's an advocacy grant to put together the advocacy plan, the plan of attack, I guess you could say. That's a terrible word, but the plan of, the course of action, that's better, for our federal recognition. What are the steps in that process? We still need help. I'm continuously looking for somebody who has federal legislative knowledge. It doesn't have to be specific about Indian politics and Indian policy and Indian legislation. We just really need somebody. I'm hoping there's somebody out there who can say, whatever you do, don't do that. If there's one or two things, like whatever, you know, that's the long way around. Don't go that way. We just could use a little support and advice. I've got a few people who do California legislation that have helped, but everybody keeps telling me they're quite different scenarios, like California, obviously, and the feds. So we've got that in place. Of course, we just had a big fundraiser. And then we've got 2 other events coming up. Our big Cultural Day and Community Day is Nisenan Heritage Day, which is the first Saturday in November. And that is in partnership with Sierra College, Nevada County campus. And it's a great time to come out and see our native artisans, to hear a lot of the speakers. We do bring people like Dr. Sherry Tatchin, Susan Hanks from the California Library. She was the tribal liaison in the library programs. She was actually instrumental in the first library grant we got together with Nevada County. She kind of brought us together with the funds to make that first one happen, of course, with our Nevada County librarians. It's just a really good place to come. And usually we have the Indian dancers who come, Nisenan dancers or Miwok. And so you get to see some culture, hear some great talks, and have some Indian tacos. We have a church taco tent that the family runs and makes some really delicious tacos. And then in September, we have a farm to table dinner event. That's September 23rd. That's happening at the Miners Foundry this year. And it's a really good way to come together and have some good food, support the tribe, support Chirp, and have a few presentations. And then we've got Lila June and Mom Muse coming again. They haven't come yet because we had to be postponed because of the COVID. They were supposed to be here on 4/4 and then rescheduled to July 25th. But now the next date is September 12th at will be the newly opened Center for the Arts. And so there'll be Lila June and Mom Muse. We do have a link of our past little virtual concert where they came and just gave a 10-minute little tidbit of what you're going to get when you come in September. So you can find tickets to all that stuff if you go to nisenan.org. You can see what events are upcoming. And don't forget to get Richard's book. Is there anything else that I should share with? Are there any other questions, Al? It's because I talk so much, nobody can get a question in edgewise. That's probably why. Are we down to our end? I don't want to talk over. Oh, we still got a little bit of time. Oh, okay. So can I really did want to spend a little time talking about my background. So as I was speaking about the Firehouse #1 Museum, for the longest time, it was the only platform that we had for anybody to see anything Nisenan. They have, if you can see it all back here, or if you've been there, they have a great basket collection that they were basket items that were donated to the people who eventually started the Historical Society. And we have a really beautiful photo wall that we did with Judith Lowry and Akeem, a photographer friend. We have some regalia there. And, you know, it was a little odd at first because I don't know if I should get into the story of the doll or not. Anyway, you can see my great cousin Weary here. This is before he passed away. He's been gone now about 5 years or 6 years, I think. Here he is with the chair with we had about maybe 10 people in here. There's some people sitting around the edges. He was talking to them about the old traditional salmon runs. I think this was at the very beginning of that FERC process I was telling you about. People are trying to say the salmon didn't come up as high as they did. And Weary was saying his memories of the salmon coming all the way up Deer Creek, where the old people would go fishing off this hill back here and they'd get the salmon because it was the best spot, you know, really contradicting a lot of, well, I guess it's not contradicting knowledge that's out there today. It's just, giving a perspective from somebody who knows a different story. You know, maybe those folks who wrote those reports didn't see the salmon come up that high. And, you know, here you're getting an older perspective of a very important issue here with us, with our dams, with our salmon. His perspective was incredibly important and incredibly impactful in this conversation. But at the museum, this was our only space. I mean, we obviously didn't have chirp yet. We didn't have this office. We hadn't even started Heritage Day. I think our first Nisenan Heritage Day was here at the Firehouse, and Judith literally was showing her incredible art, huge, beautiful art on her laptop to a small audience. I think we had about 20 people there. Wasn't ideal, but we made it work. Here, I think that's Steve Pauly, who we lost. You know, they're looking at maps together, him and Weary, talking about the salmon runs and how high the salmon came up. You know, and that was 10, 11 years ago. And I think of how far we've come and how, you know, we've got so many pans on the fire right now, and sometimes it seems a little like, you know, which pan? Oh no, like the Russia thing, and then comes in out of nowhere. Oh, and you're going to add another pan? Is that smart? You know, but I think each gives so much importance to one another, and you've got this cultural fabric. It's hard to just pick one spot. Like you can't just talk about salmon without talking about everything else. I mean, the cultural history that goes around our salmon ceremonies here, you don't really find in a book. And if there's somebody in the tribe that remembers where that knowledge has been passed on uninterrupted, that's really important. And luckily we have those things. We just need to get a little more capacity so we can get a substantial archive of all this going on. And then, you know, some of the baskets. These are some of the baskets at the Firehouse Museum. This is probably, you know, it's big. It's an acorn feasting basket. And unlike a lot of the museum artifacts, lack of a better word, that you see, most are in museum quality, right? They're perfect, they're pristine. Well, most of our baskets are heavily used, which is a real joy for a lot of the weavers who come, because much like Tanya, when we were looking at those feather blankets, you know, you don't really get to see inside the creation of something like that unless there's some wear to it. They're so incredibly made that you can't see inside. And so in our acorn basket, I don't know if you can see in this photo, but there's a lot of native patchwork that's gone on because acorn is very heavy, and they would have see that lighter colored line? I think you guys can see that, yeah. Where they put a rope up around it so that the men could hold, usually 2 or 4 men could hold the rope and carry it because it's so heavy and so dense. And so the bottom always wants to fall out. because it's so heavy. And of course, they cook the acorn right in the baskets. So, but you've got this native patchwork from a long time ago, so that weavers today can look at these and say, oh, that's how they did it. Okay, we're having that issue too. And, either they're making their own creative ways to solve the issues, or they can look at something like any one of these baskets are all heavily used. This one over here is pretty pristine, and I think it was made for trade because it is a little bit different shape and a little newer than the rest of them. I know we have, the Firehouse. I like to come back to it because not only was it our first voice, but our partnership that we have with the Nevada County Historical Society and the Firehouse Museum, it was the first. There was a lot of misunderstanding about who was from here and who wasn't. Who are the Nisenan? I thought you guys were Maidu. Who are you folks? We've never seen you before. Where did you come from? There was a lot of that conversation early on, and the Firehouse really was our, it was our home base. It was our only platform. It was our only place where we could come and share out to the community. And now that, we have a big space, and, well, some people would kick me for calling it a big space when we need a museum, culture center. But we've got this gorgeous space here. I don't want to leave them in the dust. Like, well, thanks, see ya. Which is why I continue to docent there every Friday. And I have to go. I sing to the baskets and I sing to the regalia that's there. And there are pictures of my family on the wall, so I have to honor that. I shouldn't say I have to. It's so much easier to have free Fridays, especially throughout the summer. This is what I always did with my Fridays when I was a younger person. But it still is a place where people can come and see me on Fridays. And, the museum is run completely by donations. So, I usually ask people to drop a couple dollars in for the museum, for the lights, and to come and talk about the Nisenan people. It's accessible. It's right there in Nevada City. We rely on the Historical Society because they are the authority, of history in the area. And they've recently come out real strong for us, saying, absolutely, we support your bids for federal recognition. We support you as the Native people here, and we see you. And they've got our back. And, we're moving that conversation to the cities. Our chambers of commerce have come out to stand up for us, which I thought was, you couldn't plan these paths of action. We just happened to have done projects with those people, and they were happy and like, wow, why don't we know about Nisenan culture? You're from here? Well, why isn't that in any of our stuff? And just, I love that excitement and that just, the most random people you'd think would be associated, come together and have been really strong for us. And I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up because I feel like I'm talking way too much. And it's okay if there's a few minutes open on the end. I don't need to fill every moment with my talking face. But I would just want to thank you all. I want to thank the library. I want to thank our grantor for the library grant that we got, the IMLS technology grant. The funding is crucial. I mean, I could do all this, I suppose, without a grant. I don't know if I could do this all without a grant. I don't know if that's true or not. I used to do all of this work without a grant. And I see, I've got another good 10 years at this speed before I totally burn out, and I need to do it all now. And all the partnerships and the organizations who come forward, everybody who cares to take time to sit and listen to some history and care, if you want to go to nisenan.org to learn more, find out ways you can donate, find out ways you can be a volunteer. We've got a lot of information there now. You can find us on social media. The library is, as soon as that webpage is uploaded, you can go to the library, to the Nevada County website, and find out about the Nisenan people. So I want to thank you all very much. I would want to leave you with a song. And since it's spring, I think I should share the spring song one more time, so you can just be left with a little Nisenan language. Yo, 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 payo okoi pe, payo okoi pe, yomenim ko hederi, yomenim ko hederi, yo, 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 payo okoi pe, yo, 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 payo okoi pe, payo okoi pe. Yomenim ko hederi, yomenim ko hederi, yo, 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 payo okoi pe. Hui! All right, Ekwa, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shelly. That was amazing and beautiful and fascinating. Every talk you do is just amazing, wonderful, and we're really excited to keep working with you and to keep, shouting this message out and getting your voice into the community and hopefully into the nation, so that you can get that recognition back, because we do think that's really important. I want to point out really quickly that the Doris Foley Library also has a print collection of Nisenan research materials. So that's another place you can go for more information about Nisenan history in our area. But thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Shelly, once again. Thank you, Chirp, for this wonderful partnership. And we look forward to working with you more. Okay, I'm going to stop recording now.